ever hear of the Magnificent Steiner?
The Magnificent Steiner! All right, everyone. Our units are...
I wonder if that young man ever found happiness.
Before we know the ending, we need to know what the Magnificent Steiner was actually about. And to do so, we need to start that story right at the beginning. The original idea for Steiner came from the minds of author Steve Kellerman and artist Robin Andrews, two young Americans getting their start in the comics industry. This original idea was Superman Steiner, a story about a scientist who could inject himself with pure rage to become the titular hero. Andrews and Kellerman managed to take this idea to print and began a 3-year run of this original comic, Superman Steiner. It was a reasonable success, but not quite the smash hit they'd hoped for, managing to stay popular enough that cancellation is not how it ended. 3 years in, lawsuits started to get filed from a rival publisher. This Superman Steiner had a lot of similarities in its plot to some already published stories. Under the pressure, Kellerman the author admitted that he had in fact plagiarized some ideas for Superman Steiner. The lawsuits were legit. So amidst the legal trouble, this original version of Steiner ended, Kellerman and Andrews going their separate ways. Wanting to stay in comics, Andrews started up a new company and found some success with new writers on new stories. And this is where we meet the other major player in the Magnificent Steiner's story, William Bargeld. Bargeld was a creative writer out of East Germany who had managed to make his way to America. He was also one of these new writers at Andrews' company, and it was from the imagination of Bargeld that Steiner was reborn. See, some years had now passed since the original ended, and in that time, both the publisher that produced Superman Steiner and the other company that was suing Steiner had both gone bust. That left Andrews the opportunity to use this character once again. He got in contact with Bargeld, and the pair created something new. The Magnificent Steiner was born. The pitch was this. The hero was the son of the founder of a new religious cult that lived isolated from the rest of the world. Within the cult, showing emotions was forbidden, and their greatest taboo was the emotion of anger. The hero's father, the cult's founder, preached that the accumulation of suppressed emotions produced psychic abilities and brought one closer to God. The hero had gone through severe training since childhood and had never once gotten angry. But one day, someone attacked the cult and killed everyone except for the children. The protagonist happened to be buying supplies in a town far away and thus escaped the slaughter, but returned just in time to see his father's death. At that moment, the energy of 20 years worth of accumulated anger surged up in him. His body changed, got bigger, and he transformed into the Magnificent Steiner. It could have ended there, but Andrews wanted a truly tragic backstory for his new hero, as was the style of the time. Something edgy that would bring in the readers. Big cult murder is good, but it could be better. So the opening chapter continued. The hero turns into the Magnificent Steiner and annihilates the group who slaughtered the cult and executed his father. But afterwards, it comes to light that the hero and the surviving children had been lured into the cult when they were much younger. The group that attacked had actually been sent by the children's real parents to get them out. Furthermore, the man pretending to be the hero's father had founded the cult with surviving Nazi terrorists planning to destroy America. So the hero sets out on a journey to learn the truth about the cult and his fake father. On his journey of discovery, he gets dragged into trouble everywhere he goes. He can't remember anything about turning into Superman Steiner, but when he wakes up, all his enemies are dead. This time, the comic was a smash hit. Andrews' instincts on creating a dark backstory for his new hero worked an absolute treat. The series going on to great success and completely eclipsing the original Superman Steiner. With that success, Andrews brought the series to television as well, pairing up with prestigious animators of the day to create a worthy adaptation. This too was a smash hit, the show even gaining international appeal, being aired in France and West Germany. However, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for the run of Magnificent Steiner. As it continued, tensions and differences of opinion grew between Andrews, Bargeld, and the animation company. This was only stirred on by the bad reputation Steiner was increasingly garnering. Despite its success, the show's darker and violent content was gaining ire from parents. And this all came to a head for Andrews when an old friend showed up. Kellerman had said he'd been watching the show and something about it had been bothering him. There was something evil in the content of the show, something that he couldn't properly put into words. he urged that Andrews put an end to Steiner for good. By this point, Steiner had had a good run, and Andrews was losing heart in the series. Perhaps it was time to end it after all. But before he could come to a conclusion himself, the series got cancelled. It was the TV stations receiving ever-increasing pressure from disgruntled parents that pulled the plug. And so, the Magnificent Steiner was to be brought to an abrupt end. Andrews got to work writing that final episode. 2 episodes before the finale, the hero had become aware that he was Steiner, but that horribly distressed him. Even though his opponents were all villains, he struggled with killing so many people and not remembering it. Then, 1 episode before the finale, his real mother, who was a scientist, was introduced. She asked him to never transform again, no matter what. Even if it was to protect her, he couldn't transform. Then there was his supposed father, the leader of the cult, who was apparently executed back in episode 1. Well, twist, he had stopped his own heart with his psychic powers and had only pretended to die. So we get to the final episode itself, the final confrontation between the hero and the cult leader, between Steiner and his supposed father. The cult leader uses a transformation technique similar to Steiner's. He gives in to his rage and tries to kill the hero's mother. The hero knows this man that once he called father is evil, but he still loves him. The hero also remembers what his mother had asked of him, to never transform again. In the end, the hero does turn into Steiner once again to defend his mother, beginning the final battle between him and his father. After a grueling duel, the Magnificent Steiner wins the fight, but unlike every other time, he does not kill his opponent. At that moment, the hero and the Magnificent Steiner personalities come together, emerging of his 2 sides to finally become a true hero. But there's one part of the story I haven't mentioned yet. This wasn't the only version of the final episode of the Magnificent Steiner. Andrews was heavily involved in Steiner, yes, but he wasn't the lead author. What had happened to Bargeld? While Andrews was still figuring out if Steiner should end after his talk with Kellerman, an animator approached him in tears, and it was only then that Andrews learned the show was already cancelled. But this animator didn't cry because of the show ending, it was because of the script they were already given for the finale. The script already handed over by Bargeld. So, what was Bargeld's ending? The setup remains the same. The hero knows he's Steiner, the promise to the mother, the father is revealed as having faked his death, but then everything changes. The father didn't stop his heart with psychic powers. Actually, he has the power of hypnotism, and using that, he made everyone believe him already dead. His powers were actually so strong he could control anyone at will. Using that, he went out and brainwashed nearly everyone in the United States, turning the nation into Nazi America. The hero then takes all the people who aren't yet brainwashed out into the desert. There, they make a fort and barricade themselves in. But it's not long until his father attacks. He leads a brainwashed US army behind him to destroy this final resistance. As a last resort, the hero finally transforms into the Magnificent Steiner and begins the ending destruction. He kills his father. He wipes out the army, then he goes through and kills every last brainwashed American. Then, when he's finally finished, he returns to the small group left free of his father's hypnotism. With them, he sets up a new religious cult, the hero becoming the leader, just like his father before him. The question is, which one went to TV? Well, in America, neither. Bargeld's version was animated and ready to go before Andrews learned about it, and when he did, Andrews talked with the TV stations to have it pulled. By the time he had his own version scripted and animated, it was too late. American children never got a final episode to the show. Internationally, it was Andrews' version that went out as the final episode of the complete series. For those French and West German children, they got an ending. Andrews' ending. However, there is one final wrinkle to consider. After the Magnificent Steiner ended, Bargeld was pushed into retiring. The dark tone had simply been too much, and at this time, the comic was still ongoing, but Kellerman came back to take over the story, though the sales were never quite the same. For Bargeld, he went back to East Germany with a handshake and a smile. Despite their creative differences, he seemingly ended on good terms with Andrews. Not long after his departure, the FBI began an investigation into Bargeld under suspicion of being a communist spy. For someone to put in the effort to flee the East to come to America, only to fly right back during the height of the Cold War, well, that raised a lot of questions. Questions that tragically go unanswered. But with that fact, we can finally tie this all back in to Monster proper. In Monster, we learn about the Magnificent Steiner through Grimmer. It was a show that he watched as a child inside Kinderheim 511, an East German orphanage and government project. We know that Steiner never went to East Germany. Its international distribution was limited to France and West Germany. How did this American cartoon end up on a TV at an East German orphanage? We can think optimistically. During his Prague interrogation, Grimmer does say that East German TVs could pick up the West German signals that played Steiner. So surely that's the answer, right? Or perhaps Steiner just went further than its creators ever learned, and it was just a show on East German TV. Maybe they got that internationally approved ending. We can also think pessimistically, that Bargeld went home with copies of Steiner and his own ending, that he was picked up by governments that would do things like Kinderheim 511, that Bargeld Steiner became part of a project that aimed to turn children into weapons, and that Grimmer's own personal Steiner is exactly what Kinderheim wanted him to be.
The Magnificent Steiner appeared and did all this, didn't he?
Steiner never did show up. I did it all on my own. I figured out how the show must have ended. The Magnificent Steiner. He probably became human again.